Hello, kiddies. It's your old pal John Kassir, the voice of the Crypt Keeper. And I hope you get to check out my good fiends at A Decade of Horror on the PSVG Podcast Network. I hope you love them like I do. They're a scream.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
What's up, all you ghouls and ghosts? My name is Donnie, and thank you for tuning in to the very first, the inaugural episode of PSVG's A Decade of Horror, the latest podcast on the PSVG Podcast Network, where we relive a specific year that was in the horror movie industry. The full Scream team is here tonight. Myself, Mr. Lucas Rose. What's up, brother Lucas?
Hello.
Hello.
Glad to be here.
And Josh Bones. What's up, Josh?
Hey, I'm here. Get used to it.
I tried to give everybody a scary nickname. I couldn't think of anything for me, and the only thing I could come up with, Lucas, was Puka, and I just ditched the idea. I was like, it's a bad idea. I'm not going to do this idea.
Puka, yeah. Like the Hulu movie?
Yeah. Puka Lucas.
Oh, sorry, Lucas.
It sounds like a cute, nickname you'd give to your significant other. Hey, Puka, can you get me a beer from the fridge, babe?
Puka Luca.
Yeah.
I was trying Spookus Lucas, and I was like, that just sounds dumb.
That's great. I like that.
Spookus Lucas.
All right. So kicking off our inaugural show is the year 2010. As we talked about in our forward, we got this idea. We're so excited. Hopefully you guys like this little mini series, this episodic venture into the scary movies this Halloween season. And we got the idea to recap the years that was as we head into the 2020s. So, Josh, why don't you take us back in time and let us know the year that was 2010?
Cool. Let's see if this gives you any idea of what type of horror films came out that year. So 2010, in no specific order, we have Avatar at the top of the movie charts to close out the year.
Wow.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, that feels like that was way earlier than that. I feel like
There's
Avatar was longer ago than that.
A lot of things in this year that you're going to think is a lot longer.
I hated Avatar, by the way.
As a lot of people did. Not this guy, though. Not Joshy Bones. He loves the Avatar. Kesha ends the year with TikTok at #1 on the Billboard charts.
It's a banger.
We'll hit some sports real quick. The Saints win the Super Bowl. Mickelson wins the Masters. The Giants win the World Series. The Lakers win the NBA Championship. And the Blackhawks win the Stanley Cup. For some reason, I put Spain wins the World Cup way further down, which is probably how most Americans think about that. Anyway, but Spain wins the World Cup. Haiti is devastated by a 7.0 magnitude earthquake, killing 230,000 people.
Wow.
The iPad is unveiled.
No way.
Yeah.
Unveiled? Like for the first time? The iPad.
Alongside the iPhone 4, I believe.
If you had asked me what year was the iPad unveiled, I would have been like 2002.
2002. Nope. That's by the iPhone. Actually, it probably wasn't even out yet. Lady Gaga wore a meat dress.
I remember
That's
that.
horrific.
Yeah, that is.
What if I told you guys the name Anton Dodson? What does that say to you?
I don't think I have anything.
I don't
kids.
think so
Had your
either.
wife.
Oh, yeah.
That's right. Yeah, Tosh.
I was just thinking about that earlier today, as a matter of fact. Why, I couldn't tell you, but...
You think the iPad unveiling makes you feel old. Instagram is incepted.
Wow.
I feel like that sounds about right.
I feel like that was later.
Yeah.
I feel like that's early, actually.
I think it's early. I thought it was way before that. Snowmageddon hits the East Coast, dumping 40 inches of snow in 1 week.
To give you any inkling, I was working.
Yeah, I was also working, but not to the degree you were working. Deepwater Horizon explodes.
Yeah.
Now you can watch a film starring Mark Wahlberg about it. The Zuck is Person of the Year according to Time magazine.
Oof.
And the world has been taken over with Bieber fever, and it has never recovered.
That is a thing. I forgot about that Bieber fever.
My
Everybody seemed to
goodness.
catch that cold for a hot minute.
That's the year
True.
2010 in no specific order.
Wow.
Wow.
And
That's
let me know if you want me to get into more details on other events for the next years.
My question is, did anything good happen in 2010?
You know, it was funny. I was writing all these things down, and I'm like, these are all bad.
That's what it feels like.
Sorry, Saints fans.
Boy. Yeah.
Yes, especially the Super Bowl. Don't worry, 2011 ain't much better.
Great. Can't wait. Well, maybe in the perspective is now something we can look at and say, wow, every year since before 2020 was terrible. Like now we just realize every year sucks. How about we talk about some horror movies in 2010, the top 3, as it were. Now, Donnie, you gave me a little bit of freedom as to how I would discern the top 3, and I think I went with probably the most common way that you would think of as movies being mainstream top movies, and that's by basically going to IMDb and looking at the box office, the US box office. Because when I think of where did all the money go, that tells me that was mainstream. You know, that means more people went and saw it than just the hardcore diehard fans. So that's what I went with. Starting with number 3, top 3 grossing horror movies of 2010. Number 3, The Wolf Man. You remember that movie?
Yeah, the nail in the coffin for the Dark Pictures attempt.
Yeah, wasn't this supposed to be like bringing back the original horror, like The Mummy?
Yeah,
Yeah,
the monsters.
Universal wanted to do the Dark
Yeah, the
Pictures
monster
like, universe to come back, the Universal monster movies, and they were all going to tie into each other eventually.
Yeah,
And,
and
like,
then-
they single-handedly killed it with their first film.
ended it immediately. Well, 62 million US box office is what it has earned since its release. A Metascore of 43. So not great.
You put Emily Blunt, you put Benicio del Toro, Anthony Hopkins, and Agent Smith all in this movie, and it
Complete
Save
bomb.
Yeah.
I don't know how that happens.
I don't know either. I haven't seen this. Have you guys seen this?
I
haven't
have
seen it.
not. Yeah, I
I've
have
seen it,
not.
yeah.
I did not either, so I can't say much about it, but if it's number 3, it's not a bad that's not a good look so far. Number 2. A Nightmare on Elm Street.
The remake.
reboot. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that's when, let's see. So this would have been before, or maybe in the midst of these reboots and everything, because A Nightmare on Elm Street had so many in the original series, and then it feels like it's been rebooted or somehow retooled 2 or 3 times.
Well, this is truly a theme of the decade. We have very few, well, not few, we have a few new installations that kind of take off and get some traction, but it seems like a lot of people are chasing that easy money and remaking the things that we used to like again, and that seems to be a theme for the decade. This is a very, very divisive movie, and I myself am kind of torn over it. I don't think it's good, first and foremost, and I've said my piece to our patrons before. I honestly, I don't know if you can do Freddy without Robert Englund. I think they're so much the same. I think it's going to be hard. I mean, obviously you can, but I think everything will probably pale in comparison unless you do it differently. Like, you know, you've got to really make it something new and something else. And this was kind of like a cheap imitation of what Freddy was, but at the same time, it was actually a pretty good script. I like the plot. I liked what they were trying to do with the universe, and some of the ways it was scary, you know, in different ways, but at the same time, it's just the Freddy is iconic, I guess is the way of putting it. You know, most of those slashers, we have a pantheon of slasher villains that are iconic, and Freddy probably stands at the top of them all. And a lot of it is because of his geeky, funny, quip, one-line nature, and it's hard for somebody else to pull that off. I don't think anybody has even done anything close.
The For context, Friday the 13th reboot came out in 2009. I think that's really what got that ball rolling. We were talking on Discord today. This was a blind spot movie for me. I had never seen this film, and I watched it today with headphones on my phone when my son was on his tablet.
Wow.
Because I wanted to be a little bit more educated on, there's a lot of movies on my list I wrote down that I really wanted to see, like, ideally before we talk, that, like, I just felt like I needed to, but that happened to be on HBO Max, as well as another movie that came out this year that I didn't.
I did the same thing. I rewatched 2 movies, one that I've seen recently, one that I haven't seen since the first time I saw it. And I actually think that's kind of a fun part of doing this podcast with you guys is I want to do my homework. I want to try to rise up to your guys' level, and I want to rewatch some things if they're not kind of current in my head.
Yeah. No, I feel you. I liked it. I thought it was good, actually.
Good.
But you're 100% right. You can't.
It's like different, though.
It's real hard watching Freddy not being Freddy.
Right.
And I had completely forgot that about, like, Nancy being, like, Freddy's, like, Nancy is that's Nightmare on Elm Street. So there's a pretty big surprise in this movie where I thought the lead was actually someone else. So something happened where I was like, oh, that's not what I thought was going to happen. And I was like, oh, now I feel stupid.
Wow.
Nancy's still around.
I wonder if it's worth going back and checking out now, 10 years later, basically, with all of those remakes and reboots kind of off your palate,
It's filmed real well. There's some good jump scares. They really nailed it. The problem is that it felt more. He was doing like an impression of Freddy because they had him doing Jackie Earl Haley, I should say, Rorschach from Watchmen. It was more like he wasn't allowed to be his own Freddy. Like, he was doing all the Freddy gags, all the same Freddy things, like the nails causing sparks on.
They don't let him talk much.
He didn't talk much, and his voice didn't sound good. And the hand coming out of the bathtub, they made him, like, recreate every Nightmare on Elm Street poster.
And I guess in a way that was them trying to make it different, like a silent protagonist. I just don't think that fits Freddy. Freddy has to keep that, or it's not Freddy.
Yeah, they don't give you the good stuff until, like, 3/4 through the movie. Like, you're always, I'm like, are they going to address what happened to him? And they do, but it takes almost the whole film to do it. And then you're kind of like, it builds up and it just kind of peters out. Like, we already know Freddy's a bad dude. He's killing people. But now you're trying to up the ante on why he's a bad dude. I just thought they should have nailed it at the start of the film to give you that, like, extra creepy factor. But it is what it is. I haven't seen the first one for so long. I don't remember if they address what he did in the first one or if it was the second one.
It was the second one, and it's actually, I'm glad that you brought that up because I was just about to transition. We happen to be recording this episode a week after John Saxon passed away.
Yes.
Have either of you seen the prequel that he wrote?
Prequel?
He wrote a prequel to Nightmare on Elm Street that's pretty crazy, that never got made. And, like, his script came out. It's on Bloody Disgusting. You can go check it out. And it's crazy. It's all about, like, it would have really changed the way we know and think of Freddy. It was all about, like, Freddy being framed, and he wasn't actually the child predator, and they killed him anyway. So then that justifies him coming back and haunting their kids and all that. And to be honest with you, it sounded kind of awesome. Like, as I was reading it, I was like, Elijah Wood, make this movie.
There's a minute or two in this film where they make you think that that's, like, the same situation too. Spoilers. Wow. Sorry, Lucas. That's a big segue after your number 2 out of 3.
Oh, no, that's okay. Just real quickly, this made $63 million box office, so $1 million more than The Wolfman. Metascore of 35, but
that's pretty low.
That's pretty low.
I think it should be higher.
I mean, it's a Metascore though, so.
Not that we're going to get all into scoring things. I think this is a middling horror movie. I mean, it's good. It has, if you're into scary movies, if you're into Nightmare on Elm Street, I think it's worth a watch. I just don't think it really does anything, out of its way.
Yeah, generally horror movies just don't score well anyways because it's such a genre specific.
This is actually why I wanted to do this part of the show. I thought it'd be cool to weigh our horror fan thoughts and memories against the critic and the popular, the box office popularity contest. Because you're absolutely right. I don't think horror ever really does well critically unless it's very artsy. And even then, the ones that some of the best horror movies of all time bombed at the box office, and vice versa. So it's kind of a neat genre in that regard.
It is. Real quickly, let's get to number 1 then, which, if you have a good memory, I think this will come as no surprise. The sequel, was it a long-awaited sequel, or did it just come out right after the first movie? Paranormal Activity 2. What an event that movie was. Just swept the nation by storm. I remember, real quick, basically $85 million. So $20 million more than the number 2 on this list, moneymaker, which is that's a pretty big gap. Metascore of 53, right in the middle. But like, Paranormal Activity was an event. I feel like I remember the commercials back when I still saw commercials, where it was giving you footage from inside the theater of people watching the movie, and people
scared.
Had to leave the theater and all that. Like, it had excellent marketing. Not seen since, I feel like, Blair Witch.
Witch. First time since Blair Witch, yeah. Kind of rejuvenated that found footage thing that everybody tried to do in a different way. I love Paranormal Activity.
I need to go back and watch more of it. I know it gets a little bit long-winded. Yeah, as you go
Ghost
along,
Dimension.
Yeah.
I love that one. I do.
But I mean,
with that.
like you said, at the time, it was something fresh. It wasn't, I mean, we had seen it before, but nobody was doing found footage very well.
Yeah, they did it differently.
Cloverfield might be the only other thing I can think of, but I don't even think that was
the first one made bukus of money because it was filmed so cheaply.
Cheap.
He filmed it with like 4 actors in his own house. Like, it's super cheap.
It is crazy. I mean, and you have that with Blair Witch too. It almost feels like that's part of the get with horror movies, is like, you can kind of sometimes get away. If you have a good premise, you can get away with a pretty cheap movie, and it still does really well comparatively for what you make from it. So
you don't have that box office list on you, do you?
Of the entire box office? Like,
you'd have to look
everything?
them all up. I'm just really surprised the final chapter didn't make the top 3.
It's like in the top 10.
It's in the top 10 because those were like events too. Maybe Paranormal Activity kind of beat him to the punch a little bit because it was new. But I remember, like, this Saw was the one where Tobin Bell came back, and it was a big deal.
Oh yeah, that's right. And what's funny to me is that's the final chapter one, right? So it's closing out the series. And there's so many movies. I'm like, man, that ended in 2010, basically, at that time.
Yeah, but then Jigsaw came out.
Yeah, exactly.
I wonder what year that came out. 2017. So 7 years later, they released a sequel.
The final chapter. But yeah, there was some other stuff on there that we would know and recognize for sure. Other than that, those are our top 3. It'll be interesting to see how many of those, if any of those, make our lists of the top 3.
None of them made mine. None of my top 3 are in the box office plus list, and I got
Paranormal.
So I'm going to bring up Paranormal Activity at some point on one of these shows for sure. I can tell you that. I loved the first one, not this year. The second one is actually kind of a dip for me, comparatively speaking to all of them. But I will bring up my favorite Paranormal Activity in another episode. I'll kick off this shindig, and I want to ask you guys a question. This isn't one of my picks, but I absolutely think it deserves being talked about. Is Black Swan a horror movie?
It's definitely categorized as one. I would also argue The Wolfman isn't a horror movie, though, so I don't know that I put Black Swan. It's like a psychological thriller. I don't think it's a horror.
And so many times they cross paths.
Yeah, it's true. I think like Hereditary is more of a thriller than it is a horror movie, so I guess you could technically consider it. I mean, it's up to interpretation, right? If you want to consider something a horror movie.
I wouldn't, which is why I didn't pick it. But if we did consider it, it might be the most successful horror movie of all time.
For sure.
It won so many awards and everything that year. It was pretty crazy. When I was doing my research, it just hit me. I was like, wow, Because if you just start looking around for lists and releases and stuff, you'll definitely come across a picture of Black Swan.
Did you put a Serbian film on your list?
No, no, I didn't, Josh. My first one that I'm going to throw out here is one that I really, really like, and it's also found footage, and it's called The Reef. It's basically Jaws meets open water.
Oh, yeah, I like that.
Right.
If you think open water is too much of a thriller or too boring, and you like monster films, then you definitely need to check out The Reef. The Reef is cool because it's actually set on a true story of Ray Boundy? I don't know how to pronounce his last name. But it was in the 80s. He and two friends capsized their ship off the coast of Alaska, and they had to swim to shore. And one of his friends was eaten to death. Like, that really happened. He had his leg taken by a 15-foot tiger shark. And while the shark was circling all three of them as he's bleeding in the water, his friend swam away from them to lure the shark away so they could get to shore. And obviously, The Reef is a very sensationalized version of that. But I really like because they use a lot of real-life shark footage. So it's definitely, it's not, I was going to say Megaton, but what's the other, like the giant shark, the gargantuan shark movie that just came out?
Great White?
Megalodon.
It's not that. And it's not Jaws, right? The sharks are sharks. They're not beefed up super sharks or make you feel like they're, the next Friday the 13th coming in at you in the water. They're actual just sharks. They seem animalistic, and I think that adds to the realism, which I think ups the tension. As they start to swim and you start to, it's almost like a learning experience as you learn kind of how the tide and how they're fighting against that and how tired they are from swimming and all that. All of that starts to become a reality in the theme. And I just think it makes for a really good watch. And I really like creature features. So that was one that I put on one of my top 3 films of 2010.
Nice. Yeah, I don't feel like we get enough good creature movies. A lot of the time you feel like you get kind of gypped, I guess, on the fact that the creature isn't seen enough, or you see it too much.
They go over the board with it, yeah, and you see it jump 30 feet out of the water and becomes fast and furious all of a sudden. It's like, what's going on here?
The shark takes a ramp, and
I think it's terrifying when you see like those, the shot, right, where you see the water rippling right in the middle of the camera, and then all of a sudden you see that shark fin just flip the water and go back down, and you hear it. That's terrifying. Like, to me, I think about that every time I go swim in the ocean. I walk out in the water and I'm like, wait a second.
Yeah, sometimes the relatability and like how it could actually happen is one of the scarier parts of these features. Bears are one for me. Bears are like terrible. They're like sharks, but on land.
Right.
Big, fat,
that's how they're
slow
described
shark.
all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, land sharks.
What about you guys?
Who's up?
Joshy, why don't you go? Joshy B, as you have
All right.
dubbed yourself.
Mine is a hybrid, but it had to be on my list in my top 3 because it's a beloved film, and it's Tucker and Dale versus Evil.
I was hoping it would pop up.
That's my number 3. So
I figured it might be.
there we go.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty genius. I would even venture to call it a low budget film. With Tyler Labine, you have seen him, but you might not know him by name, and Alan Tudyk, who you know who he is. He's Wash from Firefly. He's King Candy. He's every villain in a Disney movie now. All of a sudden, he's in so many things. And Katrina Bowden, who people would know from 30 Rock, who plays like the love interest, kind of, sort of. Essentially, the plot is a parody on the Evil Dead story where a group of friends go to a cabin in the woods, kinda, sorta, and Tucker and Dale are 2 very rednecky buddies who are trying to help these kids from the Three Stooges-esque pratfalls of death, where they're just trying to save these kids. That's all they're trying to do. And these kids are terrified of these rednecks. Sometimes they should be. Most times they shouldn't. And
yeah, if I remember, it kind of plays into like their prejudice of what, like all these really sort of, I don't know, cocky, college age, preppy kids, and they look at these kind of hill folk, as it were, and they're like just assume the worst about them. And I think if I remember correctly, the movie did kind of a good job showing that side of things in a really smart way.
Yeah, and Tucker and Dale are continuously frightened throughout the whole movie about what's happening, and they really don't want to be involved as much as they are. Mm-hmm. It's just a very funny, tongue-in-cheek, not traditional horror film, but it certainly fits in. It's more Evil Dead 2 than Evil Dead 1. It's more Army of Darkness than Evil Dead 2. So it's like that progression of films. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's a great film. It's directed by Eli Craig, who did some interesting films, notably in horror, The Rage, Carrie 2.
I saw that one in the theater the day it opened.
Really?
I did. I was there.
You were... Actually, he wasn't even the director. He was an actor in it.
There was no doubt I was going to miss seeing the Carrie movie live. You know, how many chances do you get that? It was a letdown, but still.
Yeah, so Tucker and Dale versus Evil. Great film if you can catch it. It really, I think, is a movie I want to see if it holds up. I'm not entirely sure that it does.
I was going to say, I haven't seen that one in many, many years. I didn't see it when it came out. I saw it years later. I think it was on one of the streaming services.
Netflix, yeah. I was just thinking.
I was thinking, and I watched it and had a good laugh with it. But I saw it on some other people's lists, and I thought about it. But I think this is a pretty strong year, at least for me.
Nice.
Cool.
Well, since that was one of mine, I'll skip up to my number 2 and go to Insidious. Like you had mentioned before, Josh, this was just underneath, probably top 5, I think.
I think I had Insidious 2011. Was it 2010?
Now, see, we talked about what before the show. I'm going to have to go back and make sure as we continue.
I got you.
They didn't open in some
I'll check for you.
Tribeca.
I'll allow it.
September 14th, 2010. You're good. You're safe.
Don't worry, I'll make another mistake somewhere else to make up for it. But I remember this movie. I think Jason and I were both pretty interested and excited to watch this movie, and it went in some places that I wasn't really expecting it to go. And obviously I haven't seen this probably since it came out, I think. So it is overdue for a rewatch, of course. And since then they've had some, for better or worse, some sequels. But at the time it was one of those kind of ghost haunting stories that felt a little bit fresh. You have a family who are in search of help for their son who fell into a coma. And I don't know, it had just like, it explores this paranormal side that had a little bit more depth to it, I felt. Because help me remember, were we in the midst of the exorcisms and hauntings and stuff?
Yes. I thought you were about to go to a different place. I thought you were about to ask me something else.
Exorcism of... No, the last exorcism.
We had the last exorcism. This is coming a couple years off of the last exorcism, the exorcism of Emily Rose. Yeah. This was kind of in the thing, and there was like the whole resurgence of the haunted house with the paranormal activities and stuff like that. Like some of this stuff started to come back. Started to have a Reef. Now I'm going to go ahead and give you my mistake. I had this listed for 2011. So one of mine off my list for next time will be off. So I can help you out here a little bit because I have it here.
Yes, please.
Directed by James Wan.
Yep.
Furious 7.
Fast and Furious director.
Conjuring, all kinds of stuff, right? It's crazy that... So the Conjuring universe, I love, and it's going to come up a lot in this series. I'm a big fan. It's crazy that it stars Patrick Wilson in both The Conjuring and Insidious, because I think a lot of people assume them to be the same, and he's playing completely different characters, and they're not related.
Yeah. Yeah, that is weird. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah,
That's
and it's
funny.
crazy. He's like this. He's like a main character in multiple horror franchises with multiple installments in different like universes. It's I'm just like, why just pick a different character? Because James Wan does The Conjuring too. It's like they were shooting the same movie or shooting on the same set or something. It's like, come on, get
Yeah, it's like a
different
package
people.
deal or something.
Yeah, and so his son inherits the ability that he had that was suppressed as a kid to venture off into the astral plane and talk to demons and stuff. And this movie really got me, I think, rejuvenated or really excited to go back to theaters. I saw this in theaters. I saw it with my wife, and it was really terrifying, I think, in theaters. This movie, for 80% of the movie, from start to up to almost the end, does a great job of setting tension and a tone for the movie, and it kind of grips you. All of the scares are off in the background, and they're very like jump scary. They're all closing doors and turned camera shots and everything like that. And I love that kind of horror. I always have. So I really loved it. It's just the ending did not land. The very ending did, but the movie gets weird, right? Like the dad goes after the son. It becomes all poltergeist, but not like fun poltergeist where he goes off into the darkness, and there's like you see the devil. He's like a dude who's like painted up. You're like, what is happening? It gets real kind of cheesy. It just loses it. It loses what got it there. By the time the end, they kind of cut bait and then kind of go a little cheesy, and then they come back with a nice ending. So I give them a little credit there. They didn't end on that kind of sour note, but that hurts a bit for me, but it was still in my top 3 for the next year. So, I mean, I love the movie.
See, and that's why, or that's what I was thinking, is that he goes into that dimension. And I thought that idea was interesting and kind of what made me go, okay, this is a little bit more. But then, like you said, it could be handled a little bit better. And that's probably why I stuck at it too, instead of my number 1. So
cool. Back to me then.
Yeah.
Josh, do you want to talk about the Crazies remake?
Yeah, we could talk about it. It's my number 1, so let's talk about it now.
Spoilers.
It's my number 2, and it stars Timothy Olyphant from Scream and Gone in 60 Seconds and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and Justified and Santa Clarita Diet, and he's in all kinds of stuff, and he's awesome.
And he also plays a sheriff in this.
He's a sheriff.
He's also from Deadwood and The Girl Next Door.
And this is a remake of one of George Romero's films.
Yes, he also was executive producer on here.
Have you seen the original?
No.
It's not good.
No.
It's 70s, right?
73?
Yeah.
I didn't write it down. I think 73. It's not good. I watched it last year when I was doing my 100 horror movies quest, and it's just not good. And I'm really happy they remade it because the remake is excellent. It's a really good, scary movie. It does a really good guessing game of kind of leading you along as to trying to figure out what happened without ever really, showing you. So I really like that part about the movie. I think he does an excellent job, and it just has really good effects and really scary stuff. The first one is really different because the original it's not different necessarily, but when you watch it, I think you'll realize what I'm talking about. So in 73, they're coming off of like Nam and, like eras of Cold War and biological weapons and stuff like that. So like in the original one, you see tons of dudes running around the town in like hazmat suits and like army guys with like AK-47s and stuff. It's just it's a very kind of occupational government, kind of like Red Dawn-ish type of movie. And when you watch the remake, it's completely different. And the remake feels like it's, the first 6 hours of something like that, like really before the government gets there, everybody's going nuts and everybody's going crazy as the movie. I think the original movie was supposed to be called Mad People or something like that, but the original script. But yeah, the idea is this biological weapon makes people go crazy. And because people are going crazy, people that aren't infected go crazy, and we all become the crazies, I guess, is the ultimate trip. But Josh, good pick, man. I love it.
Radha Mitchell, who people will know from Silent Hill, who's also a very good actress in other films, but she was the main lead in Silent Hill. It really holds up well. I've seen it more recently probably than most films in this past decade. It just shot like very well. It has this, you're right, it has this like mystery. Like you're trying to like figure out what's going on, because really it's just people not acting like themselves, and some people handle it differently, or it takes longer for some people, so they have different like mannerisms and like violent tendencies. So you never really know when the main characters are safe or in danger. And Timothy Olyphant's wife is pregnant also, so it adds some like stress to almost every situation she's in. I think she's a doctor too, which makes it even more intense, because she's always around these people.
It kind of has that Walking Dead appeal.
It's like very much like Walking Dead.
Yeah, like that first episode of The Walking Dead, or maybe the first 2 or 3, where Rick is really trying to organize things back instead of like trying to run away. Like the movie kind of starts that way. He's trying to like figure it all out and get everybody back, and then it turns into a we got to get the hell out of here type of thing.
Have you seen this, Lucas?
I did. Yeah, I think I saw it after it had already been out for a while, and I wasn't. I think I passed on it because I wasn't expecting much.
Yeah.
But I think my buddy Jason was talking about it, and then I was like, okay, he recommended it or whatever, and I said, okay, I'll watch it. And it was, it just missed my list actually. So that tells you anything. Definitely top 5, top 10, something like that.
Nice.
So I would definitely agree with you guys.
Nice.
It's a good one.
Lucas, I think
number 2.
I was gonna say, does that make
it Josh? I don't know.
Well, it was Josh, and then some of us had like doubles and such.
Yes.
So I'm on my number 1.
I have my number 1 left. Josh has his number 2.
This was his. So Josh, why don't you do your number 2 then?
So, I mean, we already talked about it. It wasn't even on my list until today, but I really putting, it could be recency bias, but I'm putting Nightmare on Elm Street remake up there.
Wow.
Nice. And this is what I'll say. So I have my short list of movies from 2010 of movies that I either wanted to see or have seen. And I didn't get to watch Devil, which is actually on HBO Max. Because I know it's like they say, the rumors are like it's M. Night's like return to form after some of his flops. So I really wanted to see it. I put Monsters on my list. I don't know if you guys have seen this like indie film. It's like almost like Cloverfield-esque.
Is it like New Zealand or Australia?
Yeah.
I saw that. It was on Prime.
Yeah, the acting is not great, but I did enjoy like the story aspect of it. I had Saw and I Spit on Your Grave on my list. But I have I don't know that I like to recommend these like revenge porn movies.
I Spit on Your Grave was on my list, as was Last Exorcism, but I left it off. I think for the same. I wouldn't recommend I Spit on Your Grave to most people.
It doesn't really age that well, and there is
like 2020 time.
There's an argument where you could say, well, it's empowering in a way.
That's why why it needs to be made, but it's pretty rough.
It's got to be handled very
So I mean, I'll say about Nightmare is, if you're like an old school guy who likes like Freddy, Jason, Mike Myers, these people, this is still a movie you should see if you're in that. And if you're one of those guys, it will also be hard to separate the actors of Freddy. But everything else about the film is it's well acted. It's very well shot. There's some twists and turns that I didn't expect that I enjoyed very much. So if it's in nice with like these. I was watching this and I'm trying to remember if the kids in the first Nightmare movies were as like angsty as the kids in these movies.
Oh yeah,
they were just a different like decade, so they're the angst is different.
They definitely were.
So, so it's a little much at some points, but once you kind of settle in with who the characters are, I think it all fits and it makes sense.
Respect, and consider me shocked, because in my forward I open up about how I believe of the three of us, I think both of you are probably lean more towards artsy stuff than I do.
Yeah.
And then especially for like thrillers, I definitely think, Josh, you take that lean, whereas I think I lean way more into slashers than both of you. But my number 1 pick is more of a, more of a psychological thriller, definitely like artsy pick, and I didn't have like slashers at all on here. So I was thinking of that as I was making my list. I was like, my list doesn't even represent my own thoughts of myself.
I'm surprised that you picked Resident Evil Afterlife as your number one. That's
No,
a very bold move.
I did not. But Lucas,
Yes.
it's your number one.
I am curious if you guys have seen this movie. I Saw the Devil.
Ooh, I have seen this movie.
I watched this recently, so like Josh said, maybe it has the recency sort of bias, but it is a good movie. Domestically here, now this is a movie from Korea,
I think
maybe?
that's right.
South Korea, yeah.
South Korea?
Nailed it.
Yeah. So obviously it's not going to do so well here. It's got subtitles and everything, but it has this okay, so the plot is that there's this secret agent man, and he there's only
saying it in my head, just so you know.
as you should. There's really only one sort of scene that sets that up. So you see that, and it's very low key. It's he gets this phone call while he's at work. He has the earpiece in. He's talking to his girlfriend as she's stuck on the side of the road. It's winter time, and they're just talking, and he's trying to comfort her. He like goes off into the bathroom and sings, like drops his whole tough guy facade. And as she's sitting there waiting for a tow truck or whatever, this school bus, like school van, it's not a bus, but it's clearly public transportation of some sort, stops by, and this guy gets out and offers help. And all of a sudden, like the whole tone of the movie changes from that point on, and you just kind of get these creepy vibes, right? You don't even know if it's founded or not. You know, you kind of, oh, maybe I'm just getting, feeling weirded out by this person who's actually trying to help or whatever. Well, this person turns out to be a serial killer, and he kills this secret agent man's girlfriend, soon to be wife. And it's not as simple as that, right? It's not as simple as he stabs her or whatever. No, he drags her back into his kill lair, where he proceeds to kill her after she lets him know that she's pregnant. And he, like, you immediately get the sense that, wow, this is not joking around. This is not going to pull any punches. I felt pretty like I was eating something, and it didn't gross me out, but I got this stomach feeling where I'm just like, psychologically, this just feels wrong.
I haven't seen this movie in years, but that's what I remember about it. Like when you said it, I was like, oh, I remember that movie. It was hard to watch.
It's gore. It's not super gory, but it doesn't pull any punches, and it just, the themes of it are so just rough to get through sometimes. Now, you can tell it's a good movie because they do give you breaks. There's times where stuff like this isn't happening. You're learning about the people who were affected by her death. One is a police chief, her father. And you're also learning about the serial killer and what he does outside of this, and how he lives a fairly normal life, or at least you feel like it, until you start learning more and more about him and what he does on his free time. And yeah, I don't know. It really kind of psychologically, I thought about this movie after I had watched it for the next week. And that to me is always a good sign of a movie that I appreciate, that it would stick with me after viewing. And I start thinking about, like, what is this movie telling me? What is it trying to say? What is the story? What am I left with here? And this has that in spades, because not only do you have that serial killer story, but you also have the plot of revenge from Secret Agent Man, who goes out of his way to track the serial killer down, and not just exact revenge, but also kind of do unto him what that man does to other people.
Yeah.
And that is a whole nother kind of side plot that doesn't necessarily work out the way that you think it's going to. And I'll just leave it at that, because it is worth watching, even if it is kind of rough to get through. So that's my number one for 2010.
My number one is a decent segue because it's a remake of a foreign film too, and that was what I was going to talk about. It is Let Me In, which released on October 1st, 2010, starring this year. And so I said this in the forward. I don't think I track directors and actors as much as you two, so I probably screw these names up and you guys correct them.
Well, he's trackable now, though.
Cody Smith McPhee, he's in The Road and Paranorman.
Oh, sorry, I meant the director.
Elias Koteas is in Shutter Island. Chloe Grace Moretz, Carrie, Suspiria, did voiceover in Dishonored, Amityville, and Richard Jenkins, which we'll talk about in a movie coming up in an episode shortly. And it is directed by Matt Reeves, who directed Cloverfield. And it is a remake of Swedish's Let the Right One In. And it also happens to be my favorite vampire movie ever.
Really?
I don't really like vampire movies. Not most of them. Like, I like vampires. I like The Lost Boys. But typically, like in horror, like the vampire stuff, like Interview with the Vampire, 30 Days a Night,
Bram Stoker's.
Yeah, Dracula. Like, those have never been my favorites. I like them. Don't get me wrong. I watch them. They're just never been my favorites. I love this movie the first time that I saw it. I think it's an outlier for me because it's very artsy. It's kind of romantic in a horrific kind of way. And have either of you seen this?
Yes, but not since it came out.
Okay.
I have not, but it is on the short list.
I think you'd like it, Josh. When I was thinking of movies and I was actually going through, I have this Blu-ray. It came with a really cool little comic book. And as I was going through my movie case, I pulled this one out and I was like, oh yeah. My wife loves this one. And it's a really great pick if you're looking to sit down and watch a scary or a horror movie with somebody who doesn't really like them. Stars about a boy who gets bullied a lot. And there's even a scene in the beginning of the movie where he has like a mask on and he has a knife and he's standing in front of a mirror and he's like, you like that little girl? And he makes you think this kid is like demented, right? You almost get Halloween vibes. And then the way they kind of, I don't know, like turn it around, it's not that big of a reveal, but what it is he's being bullied by these kids at school who calls him little girl. And a lot of it is this young boy who's just like, he's really being tormented by these kids at school. I mean, they're very, very mean to him. At several times, the bullying is worse than some of the actual killing scenes. Like, they're almost harder to watch those scenes. So it has these kind of Carrie vibes, I guess. But he comes across a girl, a new family moves into the apartment building, and the girl just happens to be a vampire. You don't really find it out first, but you know there's something strange with the girl. Like, she doesn't wear shoes, and it's like super cold. She's like standing in the snow, and he's really into her because nobody talks to him, nobody likes him. So they're very nice to each other. They become very good friends. They have this boyfriend girlfriend type of relationship, even though they're real little kids. You know, it's not like adult. It's not teenage like high schools. It's much younger than that, and they're just really sweet to each other. And then killings and things start happening. So the character that Richard Jenkins plays, he's kind of her friend, and he actually goes out and kills people and brings the blood back to them to eat. That's how they stay alive. So those scenes, there's one good scene. I definitely wanted to put in one like good horror, like scary movie scene. There's one scene where he puts this person upside down and he stabs him in the neck and then lets the blood run down into a funnel into like a milk jug. But it's, like I said, it's in the snow, it's at night, so all of the blood is like steaming, it's warm. And I just think it was like a really good effect. I was like, look at that attention to detail. It's like one of the things that I've always remembered about it. I did rewatch this one today, but I've rewatched this one maybe every 3 or 4 years. It's always kind of a quick pull. It's a quick recommendation for me, and it's got a lot of cool stuff in it. It's got some blue oyster cut in there. You got like some kill scenes to some 80s vibes. I always love that in a good horror movie. There's like the backseat killer kind of like urban legend, high beams type of stuff. There's a lot of little nods to different stuff in there. I think if you're looking for them, or at least maybe I think they're nods, maybe they're not. But like I said, it's a romance. It's about these two people that find each other, and then at the end, his bullies get what's coming to them, as most good horror movies do, right? They make the bad people get what's coming to them, and that happens, and then they kind of go off on their own, and it still has all the tropes of vampire, like she can't be outside in the sun and stuff like that, and they have story elements to show that and all that, and but it's more realistic. And the way they shoot the vampires, the vampires don't turn into bats and they don't like hang upside down and stuff like that. They're people, but it's crazy that she moves. She has a couple scenes where she attacks people and she moves incredibly fast and twitchy, almost like glitchy, you know, through like climbs trees and stuff. And it's creepy and it's odd and it's scary. But at the end of the day, it's I feel conflicted saying it's touching, but it's touching, even though like she rips people's throats out. It's a touching film. It's better. It's the best Twilight. It's way better than that. So
Twilight, what a plug.
But I really, really liked it. So that was my number one for the year.
I can watch it for free.
It is free. Free on Tubi.
Oh, and Tubi and Pluto TV. So
with commercials.
I will watch that.
So, gentlemen, that brings us to the hard part.
I have a couple of side notes if you'll indulge real quickly. Number one, I became aware of this movie fairly recently. It's called Beyond the Black Rainbow, and it actually did come out in 2010, and it didn't make my list, although I considered it, because it's very much out there. And if you have the opportunity to check it out, it's very much a cult movie. It's not like you're either going to love it or hate it, but if you want something super duper crazy different, check it out, because it is like the equivalent of being on drugs in movie form. It really is. I've never seen anything like it, except the other movie he did, which was Mandy, and that is why
now I know what this movie is.
Yes, it's probably hard to find, but if you can get your hands on it or find a place to watch it, I would say it's tough for me to recommend because it's so black and white as far as if you're going to like it or not. But if you're in the mood for something different, check it out.
This trailer is creepy.
Yes. I mean, it almost doesn't even fit in the aspect of horror, but it is definitely psychological. The other thing I wanted to mention is that, are you guys familiar with the movie Birdemic? Shocking.
Yeah.
That also released.
That's a new one for me.
Oh, Donnie, don't.
Don't.
It is. If it hasn't been riffed on by Mystery Science Theater 3000 or the likes, then
it's on How Did This Get Made podcast.
Yes.
So if you want to listen to it, listen to Jason Mantzoukas tear it apart.
Yes, definitely. Real quickly, the other movies of this year did just because to give perspective as to what some of these movies that we've talked about are up against. You already mentioned Resident Evil Afterlife came out. Saw, the final chapter, we talked about that. The Last Exorcism. And then we talked about Devil and Legion. I don't remember if you guys remember Legion, but that was big.
What about LA Zombie? Did you cover that one?
No, I did not.
Did you know about that one?
I don't know about that one, but I'm making notes. I'm like, I got to rewatch this.
That's the beauty of the show. 'Tis the season, get in the Halloween spirit, and let's give all of our listeners some picks. There's some they may want to rewatch, some they've never heard of.
Yeah, start a watch list for sure. But yeah, thank you for indulging me, and please, sir, can carry on.
Gentlemen, we have to pick one movie of our picks to represent this year in our trek to count down a decade of horror. I think we only shared one movie between the two of us, right?
Yeah.
It's gonna be the fun part of this.
Okay, I would feel fine to vote in any of my three. I would also accept Insidious. We have 2 votes for The Crazies, I know, if we want to go that way. So I'll start off, I guess, deliberations and say that. I will stick up for Let Me In. I picked it to be my favorite movie of the year because I think of all the movies I saw, I think it's the best. I think it holds up really well. But it's also very, very artsy and at times sweet and not really a horror movie. So I understand that. Not like The Crazies.
It sounds really good.
The Crazy, I think you're going to love it, actually. And I feel like when I recommend stuff to you, because I don't do it often, but I feel like when I do, it hits. I have a good sense, I think, for what Josh likes. But I'd be interested in hearing you watch it and tell me I'm wrong.
Well, something we could do this at the end of this, when we do our recap, if we watched a movie from one of the years that we didn't vote for.
Oh, yeah.
I like that.
So like if we don't pick Let Me In now, but I watch it before we
You want to make a case to change it later?
I could, yeah.
Okay.
Assuming that more than just me watched it. That's also a big to do. Like, I'm not saying that that's feasible.
Sure.
but it could be feasible for
Sure.
1 or 2 of the years.
So I will side with either one of you on either The Crazies or Insidious. The question is, will either of you side with either of you?
Well, let me say this. My thoughts, I actually was going to concede The Crazies just off from the stats here that 2 of you had already picked it. That would be what would make sense. I do feel that Insidious is possibly more representative of the year, if that makes any sense, based on what was happening.
Yeah.
But that, you know, that basically is saying that would be the popular pick. And I don't think we're necessarily here to do that. So if we were to choose The Crazies, I would be all right with that.
I like where I'm sitting. I don't have to do much debating. I mean,
Okay.
I was going to pick the Crazies. That would be, but only because it was shared by at least one of us, and Lucas has also seen it and enjoyed it. It just barely.
And I said
missed
it just,
his list.
yeah, exactly. So that is why, that's where I'm coming from.
Hey, well, it's our list, and I don't think anybody's going to hold us to it. We're not experts.
But I am going to put. I already put I Saw the Devil and Let Me In on my 2 watch list. I'm just going to add Insidious.
With Let Me In, by the way, has any of you seen Let the Right One In?
Yes.
Yes.
I like this one more, and I feel like that's crazy talk, but I typically don't like watching a whole lot of foreign films that are subtitled, but there's some that I do. So I was trying to think of that today before we started this podcast. I wanted to try and figure out why, or at least maybe come up with an idea. I think I like subtitled movies that don't have tons of elaborate writing, when it's not as big a thing to follow, you know? So like if I'm watching like Train to Busan or something like that, I'm totally fine. Like that's good. Let Me In, or Let the Right One In, very touching story, lots of dialogue, you know, like, so I watched it because when that movie came out, it was kind of all the rage if you follow the horror scene. So I watched it, but I like this one more, personally.
The second you said that, it made me think of High Tension.
Oh, yes.
Not a lot of smart writing, but it's still definitely a thriller.
A movie that
I remember recommending it to Lucas, and he hated it.
I didn't hate it. I found it very
Josh-like.
I wouldn't want to follow any sort of like psychological thriller in subtitles personally. I feel like I'd be reading more than I'm watching, I guess.
I was going to say culturally, sometimes it feels like things are get transferred over better when they just remake it and kind of translate what those meant to the original audience.
It's like if I was to pull from like an idea, like if Midsummer was in Swedish, for example, it was in a different language, I feel like I'd miss so much of it.
There's so much going on in that.
It was so hard to follow in English.
Yeah.
For me, you know, I'm just like, oh man, if it was in a different language, I think it'd be hard to follow.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay, so that'll be our pick for the year that was 2010 as we move on towards other years. The Crazies, which we will, as Josh said, subject to be changed later on appeal. As we plan to do, we will have a recap where we recap all of our yearly picks and provide you our one list to represent the decade of horror that was. So without further ado, thank you guys for listening, and we hope you stay tuned for further years to come. But remember, this is the end, friends.
Hi, I'm Chucky, and I'm your friend to the end. Heidi ho!